Continuing Chapter 13, Persepolis, from Part 2 of Alexander of Macedon by Harold Lamb. Once on a route march, Alexandros had noticed a transport driver. This man had shouldered heavy bales that had been loaded on a mule. When the mule went down, the weight was too much for a man, and Alexandros asked him what he was trying to carry. "It's your property," the Macedonian growled. "Valuables." "Then get it into the camp, if you can." Alexandros said nothing more then, but at camp he ordered the contents of the bales to be given to the man who had carried them in. He seemed to be indifferent to the new wealth as far as it concerned him personally. He gave decisions about funds without thought, except to make gifts. Already there were more than enough for everybody. The men noticed that their commander liked to be asked for gifts. An actor extemporized a plea for cash for deserving thespians during an evening's performance, and Alexandros laughed and gave in. One young officer, however, made no such request, though his duty kept him close to the king. After a time, Alexandros became aware of this. "Why don't you ask for anything?" he demanded. The officer did not explain, but at the game soon after, when they were tossing a ball from hand to hand, he made a point of throwing the ball to everyone except Alexandros, who stopped the game to inquire why he was being left out of it. "Because you haven't asked for it," the officer told him. Alexandros laughed and presented him with a gift. While he seemed to grow more indifferent to the value of money, he did not relax discipline in Persia. As much as possible, he gave judgment himself, and the men said he kept a finger on one ear at such times to remind himself to listen to justice, not to arguments. When he heard that a local culprit had been pursued into a shrine that was a Persian sanctuary, and that the Macedonians were going in to arrest the man, he advised them to stay outside and try to trick the man into coming out of the sanctuary. The Macedonians thought this reverence for local customs unnecessary, and they blamed the wings and the Achaemenians for it. These wings were a pair of eagle's wings carved in the stone over the entrances to the tombs. Such wings had been seen in Egypt, where they formed the emblem of Yasur as a sun god. They had also been found in Babylon, attached to the shoulders of the bas-reliefs of the grotesque entity Marduk. Here they supported only a head, the head of Ahura, the Lord of Wisdom, who also shared the power of the sun. If Ahura, within his disk of the sun, supported himself on the pinions of an imaginary eagle, it was all one to the soldiers, who had seen many images of strange entities by now. But it interested Alexandros greatly. He wanted to know why the rulers of Persia were related to the sun and to the wings of the eagle. When he discovered that the only temples of this land were stone altars on high places where fire burned at night, he questioned the Zarathustrians. The Greeks called them Zoroastrians, who attended these fire altars. They said that the eagle and the great bird dwelling nearest the sun formed a link between men and the sky. They believed that the Simurgh, the spirit of the eagles, descended to the hilltops to aid men. These Zarathustrians thought that the human fate was not preordained to be interpreted by the circling of the stars as Babylonians claimed. Instead, the human spirit endured through eternity, struggling to raise itself out of darkness to light, losing strength when it came under the power of evil, gaining strength when it progressed towards good. Unlike the Yahweh of the Semites, or the Lord, Bel, of the intelligent Babylonians, Ahura took no share in war, being involved only in the struggle with evil as such. In this, Ahura differed from the father god, Zeus, of the Greeks, or at least the popular ways people were speaking of these things, right? The sky is their Zeus. The soldiers said this of the Zarathustrians, yet they had a legend that the deity of the sky, who had ascended to earth, Mithra, had been born in the night of the winter solstice, in a cavern that was the grotto of the world between the star constellation of the ox and that of the donkey. This had come to pass at the time of the ascendancy of the sign of the Virgin in the night sky. So precisely had the Dionysos had been born. Mithra was a very twin to Dionysus, and it seemed to Alexandros that the Persian Zarathustrians, his men called them Magians, or magicians, had drawn their knowledge from the same source as the ancient Greeks, only the names differed, and he discovered that the Zen, Avestan, the ancient speech of the Persians, did resemble Greek. The family of their great kings, the kings of the lands of the earth, was Achaemenian, not Achaean. And at some time in the past, then the Greeks and the Persians had been related. But where had the Persians come from? From the north and the east, the Zarathustrians said, from ancient Iran, Venj, their lost paradise. There far off, in the limbo of the steppes, they had been close to the powers. Emerging, they had bred horses and ridden horses. They called an ancient breed the splendid Macedon herd, and they had worked metals. These early Iranian tribes had migrated out of the lost paradise through the land of Sogd, through Bactria and Parthia, around the waters of the clear inland sea. The Iranian tribe, called Parsa, had given their name to Persia, to the great plateau where the good grass grew that fed their horse herds. The Achaemenian clan had been leaders of this Parsa tribe. The foremost of the Achaemenian clan, Kurush, called Cyrus by the Greeks, had gained supremacy over the Metis of the mountains and had swept with his horsemen westward as far as the Mediterranean Sea. Only 2 centuries before, Kurush had reigned in at the waters of the sea. He had united the different peoples under his rule. He had laughed at the gold stored up by Croesus of Lydia on that coast. With his horsemen and his camels, he had ridden over Lydia. This Kurush mocked the Greeks of the cities, who had to get their food, he said, by gathering together in a place called the marketplace, to dispute and pay money for what they ate. Among his peoples, Kurush had said, food was given and not sold. The tomb of this Kurush stood back in the hills, under bare trees, by the thread of a stream. It was built of simple blocks of limestone, worn and burned to a golden hue by the sun. The name Kurush meant the sun. Alexandros visited the tomb of Kurush, whom he had begun to admire, climbing up the pedestal and sitting on the top tier against the sarcophagus chamber that had a pointed roof like a house. He could see the wide steps across the fields leading up to the hall and the few buildings of the first town Kurush had built, called Pasargada. Going over to Pasargada, he found no inhabitants there. The space of the hall had been leveled off against the slope of a small hill, and it had no fortification. He climbed easily up the broad steps and sat in the shade, looking over the fields now turning green. It was good country for horses. Only a few Zarathustrians attended the tomb of Kurush, who had formed the western Asiatic world into one, joining the peoples under him, but allowing them to have freedom in their lives. Alexandros told the Zarathustrians to keep on with their guard. He did not want the tomb molested now. Kurush was, he was little Carmane, so. But many paths. What is the path itself, and what's the common stuff of what the people have done. You find a lot of differences, Zarathustrians, and just talk about Yahweh and Zeus. And in this book proper, names are given in their most familiar form, whether of Greek or Latin origin. Modern usage has clung to Alexander instead of Alexandros, and to Thastion, Ptolemy, and Thais. Nearchus appears most often in Latin guise. In the case of Oriental names, an attempt has been made to give them as they were actually pronounced. The early Persians wrote Kurush and not Cyrus as the name of their first emperor, and Rushanak, not Roxana, as the name of Alexander's bride. It seemed to him that there was a meeting in the solitary white tomb among grazing herds. He did not know what meaning the tomb had for him, but he felt it. At the bend of the road going back to Persepolis, he saw the rock tombs of later Achaemenians, of Darius the Great and Ahasuerus. Whom the Greeks called Xerxes. They all had the eagle's wings and the disk of the sun above the threshold, but no city was near them, only a single fire altar, tended by priests. He thought that Persepolis itself had been built not as a city, but as a vast home palace. The columns were shaped like the trees of a vast forest. The open halls were like pavilions pitched by wanderers for a night's shelter. At first, the Achaemenians had tried to dwell within this palace. Then the administration of their immense domain, made up of kingdoms, had drawn them farther and farther afield, so that they returned only at rare intervals to the home site by the tombs. They had become lords of the first world empire. Around here, Zarathustrians said, there had been no war for 2 centuries. The Achaemenians, in that respect, had made their home like the ancient Iran-Venge of the first Aryans. Alexandros recalled that Iran-Venge, the lost sanctuary, must lie towards the east, beyond the knowledge of the Greeks, beyond Parthia and Bactria and Sogd, and the beginnings of the steppes. And he remembered that route clearly, as he remembered such things, for in his imagination that easternmost point had been the dwelling place of the gods. There was so much he could not understand in this that he sent a message west to Aristotle, asking for someone of his school to travel out to this new region. If he could not come himself, Aristotle did not come, but he sent a nephew, Callisthenes by name. When snow melted along the heights in that spring of the year 330, the Macedonian army took up its pursuit of the elusive manpower of the great king Darius. It headed directly northward, along the higher ridges, past the cliffs where Alexandros had inspected the Achaemenian tombs, moving about at cloud level, where the horses could graze on fresh grass. So it almost doubled back on the line of march of the autumn before, only keeping east of the summits of the Zarda Ku, or Yellow Mountains, among the tribal people, where food abounded. Alexandros arranged for the future government of these uplands as he marched through, quickening the pace of the army as it circled through the valley leading to Ecbatana, some 600 miles distant from the starting point of Persepolis.